All right, so we live in a world that is somewhat paradoxical because we live in a world of both victim blamers and victim mindset. And so there's this inversion that happens in the world quite often, where people who are actually being victimized are, they're taught to stuff it down and be quiet and silenced. And then we have people who aren't really victims in a real sense, where they don't ever take responsibility for improving their lives and moving forward, and those people become parasitic. But then on the other hand, we have people who desperately try to move forward in life and do the best that they can, and yet they're not allowed to really talk about the things that have happened to them that are massive hindrances that make it so that they have to carry around a lot of emotional pain, which interferes with their function, and they're not really allowed to be helped. And the truth is people, who are genuinely victimized, they don't need the kind of help that the world often wants to. People who've genuinely been victimized don't need the kind of help that the world wants to offer. The world doesn't tend to want to offer people the kind of emotional support that is required, because that's really what it's called for. It's just a more flexible world that gives people acknowledgement for what has happened to them. And that is really all that is needed for someone who's genuinely been victimized. The only thing that is really needed is for them to be able to speak their piece about it and to live in a society that doesn't force them to hide so much of their wounds. And to feel supported and encouraged to continue to move forward. That's what somebody needs when they've been smacked in the face by difficult circumstances. And then on the other hand, we have victims with a victim mindset who don't want to move forward, and they want to be self-destructive, and they don't really want real help. They don't want the emotional component of real help in terms of what it is that is helpful to them to get them to move out of that situation. What they want is an excuse to be a parasite and to continue to degenerate. And so, all right, so I just wanted to explain kind of like the dichotomy of those somewhat, the nuance here, and how there is, both of these things exist. People who use victimhood as an excuse to be parasitic and destructive, and people who are genuinely victimized and they're told to be quiet about it and shut up about it and solve your own problems. And so, I mean, that is the world that we live in. And so you can recognize an injustice in the world, and recognizing it is one thing, and talking about it is good. But at the same time, we kind of also have to reckon with the reality that in a world that is like this, how do we cope with that? How do we cope with the reality of the circumstances that are there without getting so entangled with the injustice of it that we become stagnant and self-defeating in our mindset and frustrated with trying to explain the complexity of it, trying to like emerge with a confidence despite the frustrating stupidity of the world, this obtuse nature of the world. Of you try to explain something to them and they want to throw at you all the ways in which you're wrong, but they never really have an earnest intention of understanding the spirit of what is trying to be communicated. But to me, it seems to be a matter of being very mindful of what our goals are in life. And it all comes back down to what it is that we want to achieve in this world. And when we deal with the people out there in the world who draw us in to these dynamics of conflict, it's a matter of staying true to what your goal is and why it is that you're interacting with them. With interacting with people who, we are often forced to interact with people who are troublesome and make it difficult for us to maneuver forward and to get the things done that we want done. And I think what matters is remembering why we're there and what it is that we're hoping to achieve. And if we're not achieving what we're wanting to achieve by interacting with those people, then we have to ask ourselves, why am I allowing myself to be derailed here? Why is my attention so easily captured by this person who's not taking me to where I want to go? So it can be very tricky to remember to stay our course in this life. But I think the most important thing is to know what our goals are and to continue to move forward towards them. And then be mindful of when we begin to deviate from our goals and we get entangled with people who don't seem to ever have an intention of helping us reach our goals, but they continue to bait us to think that they're a person that we have to go through in order to achieve something. What is it that we're gaining out of this interaction? is there perhaps a different goal that we're working towards subconsciously or unconsciously? Because some part of us recognizes the futility of interacting with this person, and yet we still feel to interact with that person. And an interesting thought I had about this is that when we do this, it's a great way to feel a sense of relief of the burden of having to be in control. Because when we get entangled with somebody and we can't really seem to stay on track with them, and we get involved in arguments with them, it's a way of, I think often the sort of thing in the shadow that it serves is for us to essentially vent a lot. What we're hoping is to meet our emotional need to vent frustration, and to have someone external to us that is an enemy or that is an adversary to help us feel like there is somebody or something that gives us a reason to have strong emotions, because the emotions are sort of stored in our nervous system from the traumas that we've experienced in our lives, and those emotions want to go somewhere. And most of us are sort of shamed for finding ways of expressing emotions in a more sort of conscious way of consciously, evoking strong feelings and then seeing where they lead us. So we create circumstances in our lives with people and relationships that allow us to have very powerful feelings, because instinctively we know that having powerful feelings might be a way to get those feelings expressed and find some resolve. Now the problem is that just having those kinds of unconscious relationships where you get to have an excuse to have this sparring partner who's your adversary, what ends up happening, because it's not a conscious thing and there's this adversarial relationship, it just continues to generate more emotions. So yeah, it might, like, you get to release some emotions and you get to express anger and frustration, but you end up, your system fills back up again with more. And the real underlying thing that it is that you're hoping to resolve, somehow it never gets resolved. And I think what we do is we sort of gaslight ourselves into thinking that an argument is about one thing when it's really about something completely far removed even from this person, where it's like some irritant in our system, where what we're really hoping for is just acknowledgement that there was some point in our lives where we felt lied to or threatened, and we just want somebody else's voice to say, hey, you know what? Yes, that happened to you. It was me who did that, and I'm sorry that I did that. And I'm here for you if you need a shoulder to cry on. And so I think that's often sort of what we're looking for in these adversarial relationships, is this desire to wish we could just, if we just explain to them in just the right way how they've offended us and how they impact us and what their behavior is, and just somehow make it indisputable that that's the truth of the reality, that then they will step back and then they will say, oh, okay, now I understand. I see where you're coming from. But the problem is because we're not fully conscious of our motives in the first place, we choose to fight over things that are not really what the topics that are really where we want to go emotionally, and we're not really being honest about what is triggering us and what has set us off. And because we're still trying to cloak ourselves, because we feel so weak and vulnerable in those places, we fight about things that really have something to do with something else. And I think that's what gets us diverted off of our goals, are, the real things that we want to work towards in life, or or perhaps the more practical goals that we have, and the emotional goals that we have. If we're not fully conscious of those goals and how to meet those goals and what it is that is the practical things that are involved in meeting those goals, then I think we're more likely to end up in situations where we're working things out in a very inefficient and adversarial way with people that is really not to our own benefit or their benefit. So yeah, I think it's important to pay attention to, like, when we get riled up in an argument and we're talking to a person and we're wondering, why are we even here? Why am I with this person? Why am I having this conversation? I think it's good to ask ourselves these questions, because like when we walk away from a very difficult interchange and we feel what that anxiety and stress within us, and we feel despondency, we need to ask ourselves, this is the result of interacting with this person. Why am I so drawn to this relationship that makes me feel these things? Because that is the true goal, isn't it? To feel these feelings of anxiety and despondency, because our actions betray our secret goals. Our actions in our lives betray what our hidden purpose is for things, and the net effect of our actions reveal what our true goals are. And so if we continuously have these interactions where we walk away frustrated and angry, then perhaps our true goal was not this, our more conscious thing. Perhaps that is actually something that is less pertinent to us, and what we're really more interested in is drumming up these strong feelings, finding a reason in the material world to allow us to feel what it is that we want to feel, and to fully feel it, and to try to find some resolve. Now I think we can find this resolve if we make our goal more conscious of that is what we're looking for, is the resolve. And then we can ask ourselves, well, is this person really the best person to be doing that with? Or perhaps maybe I could do this with this person, but I just need to be more honest about the things that really are bothering me, and become more articulate. And you become more articulate about what your boundaries are and what your feelings are when you begin to look inward and you begin to really look at what is it that I really have as values within myself, and why is it that I feel offended over these circumstances. And to find not just the surface level things that are where someone has crossed us, but to really find the principle, the guiding principle behind why that is crossing a boundary. Why is that a symbol for something that makes me feel threatened, and I don't like it when you do that, you know? So I think we need to become more clear about what it is that is really going on internally. And I think what also gets in the way of this is our conscious mind is more really the servant of our emotional physiology. And we think of the mind often, I think people equate their identity with their mind. But the reality is the mind is sort of like a steward that helps direct what is going on internally on the emotional level. And the real self is more this emotional thing which we have less control over in the sense of forcing ourselves to be a certain way, to feel a certain way. We can't really force ourselves to feel a certain way, but we can use our mind to create the environment and the circumstances with foresight to create an environment where we can begin to allow our feelings to be more of what we want, to have nurturance and support for the feelings that we want to feel. So we have to sort of have the kind of minerals in the soil. We have to plant the right soil to plant the right seeds for the type of emotions that we want to experience in our lives and the kind of overall environment that we have around us. And we can do that by being less of this domineering parent in our mind that we learn from our parents quite often, that told us just to stuff it down and to do it their way. Because I think that's the way a lot of us approach our feelings, is we sort of try to order our feelings around as if there's something that can be ordered around. The reality is we need to create the circumstances. We need to create the environment for the feelings that we want to have, the type of feelings that we want to feel. And we can feel a lot of different kinds of feelings. And we do create the environments. And our unconscious sort of tries to help steer us in a direction, but it can only get us so far. It only gets us to the point really where it's like we keep running into the same problem over and over to remind us, hey, there's a problem here. We need the conscious part of you to wake up and be like a good steward, a good guardian, a good facilitator, a good gardener for creating the emotional environment that we want to create. Anyhow, so I think I've went into the subject that I wanted to go into, and yeah, I think I'm happy with what I've said so far. So I'll leave it here. You guys have a good one.